Good afternoon. It's really loud. My name is Adam Alfrey. I'm the Assistant Director for Historical Services here at the East Tennessee History Center, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. These programs that we put on are a partnership between the Knox County Public Library and the East Tennessee Historical Society. They also receive support from the Friends of the Knox County Public Library, East Tennessee PBS, and our partners at Knox Community Media, who record our programs and make them available for us for future viewing. Before we get into the content for today's program, we did want to make you aware of a couple of upcoming programs. Next Wednesday, April 17, the theme will be the Thompson Streetcar Track Installation Photographs. If you've not yet seen these on the Calvin McClung digital collection, there are a remarkable set of images that were taken by Jim Thompson. He was hired by the streetcar company to document the tracks being installed throughout the town. And so they record a remarkable one-of-one view of some various portions of streets and houses. Really unique views. So we're going to talk about what happens when those images come into the collection, how we go about digitizing them, and then the research that goes into them and sharing them afterwards. So that'll be a very great program. Again, next Wednesday, April 17th, noon, right here in this room. And then the following Wednesday, on April 24th, again at noon, Brad Reeves, who is the guest curator of our current exhibition on the Carl and Pearl Butler exhibition, will be here to tell about that story, the research that went into that exhibition, and share some more of the archival footage that comes from the Butler family. So if you haven't seen that exhibition yet, feel free to step back into the museum today as our guest to see that. Yeah.
When you were talking about the photographs, what do you mean one for one view?
So they're just unique views, maybe our only existing image of a particular block in Knoxville or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. So without further ado, it's my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Graham Perry. Graham has been a force for good in the cultural museum world in Tennessee for a number of years. You're going to really enjoy his presentation today. We've worked together on another number of projects. He's also a talented musician, and if anybody has a guitar in the room, we could force him to play for us too. So without further ado, please give our attention to Graham Perry. He's the Historic Cemetery Preservation Specialist with the Tennessee Historical Commission. Graham.
Thank you very much. All right. I hope my head's not in the way. I appreciate that introduction. I usually send stuff out and there's all this stuff on there and then people say it and I sound bigger than I really am. I'm really just a human being and I just enjoy doing this stuff. I grew up in a family, my dad was a officer in World War II, and so, it was a given that I was going to be interested in history. And of course my mom was a big genealogist. So about 4 years ago, this job opened up for the Tennessee Historic Cemetery Preservation Specialist, and I had been at the State Museum, and I said, "Gosh, I wonder what you have to do that." Nobody that applied for it knew anything about cemetery preservation, nor did I. However, they knew my work at the museum, and the first day that I walked into the office, I had a desecration in Murfreesboro. And so that day, I had to immerse myself in Tennessee cemetery law. I am not an attorney, so you can't necessarily I'm sure if you've got a really good attorney that he could cancel out everything I say today. But you probably have to pay millions of dollars for that, and you're welcome to do that if you want to. But one of my roles is, besides, and I don't know if any of y'all seen the cemetery map yet, if you go to the Tennessee Historical Commission site and go to state programming, you'll see that we have a statewide cemetery map, and there's something around 30,000 cemeteries on it right now. I have spent a great deal of time finding every cemetery that I can possibly find on USGS maps. I started off with Find a Grave. I then went to TNGN Web, and so far what I've been doing after all those is I've been going on the Tennessee Property Data site, because guess what? None of those three major sites necessarily have the same cemeteries on them. So we probably have the most comprehensive map of cemeteries in the United States. I've been told that. But, it just takes elbow grease. A lot of this stuff, when people call and they're like, oh, well, will you do this for me? I'm like, no, but you can. I'm a cheerleader. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I know about cemetery law, and there will be things that I might not be able to tell you. But first of all, Tennessee law overview. I put William Blackstone on here because I want to let everybody know that cemetery law throughout the United States is based loosely on English common law, which is based on Roman common law. So basically the track that we have on the history of how culturally we view cemeteries is thousands of years old. So in Tennessee law, the strong points of Tennessee law is we have a Family Burial Grounds Protection Act is what they call it. I couldn't fit that all on the screen. But that is Tennessee Code Annotated 46.8, and we're going to talk about that today. The weak point about that is, well, many people don't read it before they do stuff. And that's where I come in. Because when I find out that people didn't read it, I inform them that they missed reading it. The relocation process is clear. It's spelled out in TCA 46.4. It's expensive to relocate graves, and therefore maybe non-compliance is worth the risk. It certainly was before I got hired. But I'm kind of like the sheriff without the gun. I'm like Andy Griffith. And that's kind of how anytime anybody calls me about anything, I check it out. I'll write nice, friendly letters to developers saying, okay, now we know there's a cemetery on that property, and here's what you need to make sure you know. And I do that all the time. Most developers, though, I will tell you, do the right thing. That's one of the things that I was surprised at when I got to this job. Tax incentives exist. You can get your cemetery. Any cemetery can be tax exempt. You just have to go to your property assessor and say that you want your cemetery tax exempt. The benefits are tiny, and often they're reported incorrectly, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Desecration law is clear. That is actually spelled out in 46.1.313. The problem is 46.1 only refers to commercial cemeteries. So there is desecration law, and it is in criminal codes, but it doesn't say for family cemeteries and for religious cemeteries, things like that, church cemeteries, what that desecration is. So the only thing we have to refer to is 46.1.313, which is very specific. But a lawyer could probably say, oh, no, that doesn't apply to a family cemetery, if they got a good enough one. Criminal penalties, they are spelled out in TCA 39, Chapter 17. What's wrong with that? Well, it's defined in Chapter Tennessee Code Annotated 39 and not 46. So you have to go look for it. There's nothing in 46 that says, please refer to TCA 3917. That's why I'm here, because I will refer you to it. There is also precedent that was established in 1911. It's like when Tennessee cemetery law was fabricated in 1911, people challenged it, and this one major court case was called Walter Hines versus Tennessee, and it spelled out that family members and interested parties have the perpetual right of visitation, maintenance, and even burial. That's a lot of things that is something I deal with landowners all the time. They don't want family members to come on the property, and I get that, but they have to. The biggest problem with Hines is some of it is incorporated in Title 46, and the visitation stuff is not. I'm still trying to work on that. Other states, their visitation is clearly in their law. So, 46.4. That was passed right after World War II. Obviously, the post-war boom came around, and somebody said, hey, we have a need to protect cemeteries when development was happening after World War II. 464101 says that in order to petition for termination of use of land as a cemetery, you have to prove that the cemetery is abandoned, neglected, or threatened. What does abandoned mean? Well, abandoned means a lot of things to different people. To our office, it means it hasn't been visited or messed with in 50 years. A lot of people say, well, that cemetery is abandoned. Last time somebody came was 5 years ago. I'm like, that's not abandoned, sorry. I mean, how many family cemeteries do you have? How many family members do you have all over the world? How often are you going to visit those cemeteries? Are you going to go to them, every one of them once a year? I think not. It's not practical. So 102, it defines interested persons, and generally speaking, it's families, but it can be other people as well. Property assessors are interested parties. They have the right of visitation to the cemetery anytime they want to, and that is state law. 464103, it talks about the process for termination, what you have to do if you want to relocate graves. You have to, well, I'll tell you what it is when we get there. We'll go into detail, but it describes that. And 104, after it has been decided that the cemetery can be relocated by the courts, it spells out the provisions for reinterment, and they are also very detailed. So TCA 46, the Family Burial Grounds Protection Act. 468103, here's the big one. A landowner has a duty to protect a cemetery on his or her property. It doesn't say what that duty is, but it says it.
Any cemetery that's on their property?
That's right.
Or just their own family?
Oh no, any. It actually spells out, it says that it says a known cemetery, a cemetery that's on a deed, but the property owner also has to make sure that a cemetery is on the deed if the property owner knows there's a cemetery on the deed. So there you go. 468103A, a cemetery must be on a deed of transfer. You can't just sell some land and then there was a cemetery there and I'm taking it off. Can't do it.
And 46, real quick, 464102 question.
Oh, yes.
We have representatives of a number of heritage organizations in the room today, and it is possible to qualify for membership in certain organization here under a first cousin, 4 times removed, third great granduncle,
Yes.
whatever, other family relations other than third, fourth, fifth great grandfather, great grandmother. How does TCA define interested person?
It spells out family members now, but a family member can appoint you to be a representative. I mean, for example, my aunt had no legs. She wanted the cemetery to be mowed. She's not going to go out and mow that cemetery, so she hires somebody to go do that. That is her she is the person, and that person is her agent. So the easiest way is to get a family member to write you I always say get things written. But I mean, if you just get a cousin or whatever, say, oh yeah, you've got permission to go out and visit the cemetery and you've got that notice, then you are a representative of an interested party. Does that make sense?
Veterans officer, VFW, American Legion, and I'm like Grand Army of the Republic.
Yeah, I mean, because we were talking about that. If the county allows you to do that and appoints you to do so, you can do it. But that's the problem if the county doesn't, and I've had situations where that hasn't happened. Like for instance, I have no permission to go out on cemeteries. There's nothing in my job description that says I have permission to go out on private cemeteries. So usually I'm contacting a family member or I'm going out with a property assessor. And property assessors are great. They're good pals.
So if you own the cemetery, it's on your property.
Mm-hmm.
You only have to allow a family member back there, just
just not anybody who wants to visit?
Family members and whoever is appointed by government, yeah.
Or if the family's designated.
Or if the family designates you.
All right, so I'm better off going to the county.
Probably. Because county members, family members are hard to find sometimes, and I know because I've tried to find a bunch. Matter of fact, we'll talk about that in a minute too, because that's come back to bite some people in the rear. I hope that answered some questions, but we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. 468-103B, it defines the protected boundary. A cemetery, a grave site cannot be disturbed within 10 feet. Or if it's a crypt, 5 feet. That means if you build a road 7 feet from a grave, you're going to have to tear it up. Sorry. Either that or you're going to have to get a variance, which if I'm involved, I'm not going to let it happen. 468-103C, if you don't like 46.8, see TCA 46.4 and petition to relocate the graves. Oh, whoops. How do I go backwards? I need to go backwards. Well, oh, I can't see.
Second one down.
Yes, you got it.
Right there?
No, there, you got it.
Okay. So I will talk a little bit about 46.1. This is the one, it's for commercial cemeteries only. Why? I don't know why they do this, and it's very descriptive. But it describes a cemetery as any land or structure in this state dedicated to and used or intended to be used for interment of human remains. Human is the key. Pet remains don't count, although I do collect pet cemeteries on the site just because it's fun. One grave in Tennessee equals a cemetery. In Arkansas, I think it's like 5. I don't know what 4 means. I guess 4 is a grave site. I don't know what they do, but a cemetery can even have no graves according to this. Intention is all that is needed. The problem is, because that's in 46.1, it's not, the definition of cemetery is not spelled out anywhere else. Well, guess what? We need a definition of cemetery for all the other cemeteries. I think this would probably hold up. There is a court case that we'll talk about that discusses, or we'll get to it, but it has to do with intent. And we'll talk about that. It was done in 1979. Cemetery purposes are any and all things requisite or necessary for or incident or convenient to the establishment, maintenance, management, operation, improvement, and conduct of a cemetery. The preparation of the premises for interment and the interment of the human dead, and the care, preservation, and embellishment of a cemetery property. Again, this is in 46.1, so this is what they spell out for commercial cemeteries. But 46.4, termination of use of land as a cemetery. So one thing that I do want to point out to you, you can have a grave relocated as a family member. You still have to petition, just as if you were going to move a whole cemetery. If you remove one family member grave out of a cemetery, that doesn't mean that the cemetery no longer exists. Okay, I have a very interesting situation where the guy's trying to claim that, and he's about to get busted for Class E felonies. So, yeah. So it 101 defines the purpose of the act as a cemetery abandoned or neglected. Neglected is probably a little bit easier to prove, but I will tell you this. Mother Nature grows up fast. I've seen cemeteries just in a year. It's like last year they were taken care of and now they're grown up. Mother Nature does not, she doesn't hold back. Is the purpose of property surrounding the cemetery inconsistent with proper reverence for the deceased? That's the big one. And I can see this, for example, there are some reasons why you might want your cemetery to be relocated. For example, do you want your cemetery in the middle of a courtyard of an apartment complex? Probably not. They still have to give you access to it if you don't let it get moved, or if you don't have it moved. But sometimes it's better to have a cemetery like that removed to a place that's easier to access anyway, because a lot of cemeteries are out in the middle of nowhere. 46.4.102 defines interested party. It can be family members, it can be relatives, and I love this, anyone having the right of easement. It applies to all cemeteries in Tennessee.
What is right of easement?
Well, you can talk to an attorney about that. I imagine that would be like getting your lawn cutters. If they have the right of easement, if somebody's giving them the right of easement to go visit, family members have an implied easement regardless.
Okay.
Yeah. And they can appoint people to go out there. 103, actions and proceedings. So this is the first step that you should do with any cemetery, with anything you do to it. First, make sure to see if you really own the cemetery or really have access to it, because you may not. Landowners sometimes think they own a cemetery, but they don't, because sometimes the cemetery is declared in a deed from 1859, which happened once, and then people just didn't ever transfer the deed, and guess what? The 1859 deed holds up. Sorry. We've had a process in Tennessee, or over time, cemeteries have disappeared off of deeds, and that's one thing that we're trying to stop. We're trying to make sure that never happens, and it is illegal for it to disappear off of deeds. Because it's called land fraud. Yeah. Oh, this cemetery was an acre, but if we just say that's not there, then we can make $2,000 an acre off this piece of land here that nobody knows is a cemetery. Land fraud. Somebody did that to me, I'd be suing them. As a matter of fact, I've had people that have purchased property where the cemeteries weren't disclosed, and they have successfully sued and won. And I will help landowners with that, like people that have purchased cemetery properties. I don't care if you're a landowner, I don't care if you're a family member or whatever. I'm trying to help navigate within what current cemetery law is. I lean on the side of historic preservation, but I'm not going to not help you just because I lean on the side of historic preservation. So 103, actions and proceedings. So see, I said that already. Check to see if you own the cemetery. And then the complainant, the person that wants to relocate the cemetery, must first publish a notice of intent to relocate the cemetery using press sources common to the county. You can't just make a flyer and put it up at McKay's. That ain't going to hold up. And this office is never going to support that if I'm called into court. The biggest issue that has been with the transfer, since the internet has been big for press sources and a lot of paper written press sources have gone away, this can kind of be a gray area, which means it's probably good to consult an attorney about that. But if you can show you've done your due diligence. I've had people that have not had attorneys that have done this successfully. Not many, but I have had them. The county chancery court must then be contacted to petition for termination. The remaining interested parties are considered defendants. Now here's the thing that I caught somebody up on the plateau doing once. I got them in real trouble. An attorney has to do due diligence before you can do a Jane Doe case. They have to prove that they have gone out to try to find family members. And when I get these petitions in my office, sometimes I'll just be like, they say there's no family members, huh? Let's see if I can find some. And I do. And then I contact the attorney and say, are you sure you want me to publish this? Because I found 5 family members, which I did. I found 5 family members within an hour. And the attorney didn't understand that I'd already been in touch with one of the family members a year ago. So, yeah, they had to like redo everything, and man, were they mad, but can't help it, man. There is a law that says before a Jane Doe case happens, you have to prove that you've done due diligence to not have a Jane Doe. Or John Doe. It can be a man too. So, the petition must be filed with the Tennessee Historical Commission, and that law has been in effect since 2018 and is one of the reasons why I was hired. Now, the thing is what it really says is it says we have to post the petition or the notice. Most attorneys send me both, and I post them both. And let me tell you, when I get either a notice or a petition or both, I look to make sure that we know where the cemetery is. When I do my write-up, you're going to see exactly where that cemetery is. And if I haven't been told where that cemetery is, I'm going to write and say, well, I'll post it as soon as you tell me where the cemetery is. And then I post it on mine. Because people have to know where the cemetery is. Oh, unknown cemetery on property. Well, who does that help? What if I have it on my map? What if it's the Smith Cemetery? You see what I'm saying? So, I do that. I feel like it's a part of my job to do that, although I really don't have to. 104, judgments and decrees, termination and removal. Well, the circuit court will determine the outcome based on evidence tied to 46-4-101. Did the person prove that the cemetery was neglected? Did they prove that the land use is inconsistent with proper reverence? Things like that. And then they have to carry it out with due reverence for the deceased. They can't just start slinging stuff around. Has to be done by a licensed funeral home or an archaeology company. And we suggest, if it's 1920s or before, that you use an archaeology company, because a lot of times there's not much left. A lot of times it's symbolic. You'd be surprised. You think there's skeletons everywhere, but they're not.
So you start out in Chancery Court, but then you got to go to Circuit Court if they rule that you can terminate it?
Huh, that's a good point. I think it's the circus. I guess, well, it is the Chancery Court. Interesting. Maybe it's the Chancery Court that makes the decision. I'm going to have to double check that for you. You need to write me and remind me of that, and I'll check it out. Anyway, the court does it. It's the same court takes the information and then issues the decree. But now you've got me thinking, and oh well, I don't know everything, and sometimes I make mistakes. So 46A, the Family Burial Grounds Protection Act. It's been around since 1996. So if you have a cemetery that something bad happened to in 1995, probably not going to hold up. I get people that call me about cemeteries in the 1970s. Well, in the 70s, they destroyed it. I'm like, yeah, I really can't do anything about that. But I can, and I do, if the graves weren't moved, I can put that the cemetery is still there. Because just because you remove a bunch of headstones doesn't mean the cemetery's not there. Yeah, I see that on all the time, like find a grave. They'll say, oh, this cemetery has been destroyed. I'm like, okay, well, maybe the surface has, but guess what? That cemetery's still there until somebody shows a relocation paper.
Now, what if they just take the gravestone and stick it in another cemetery, but they don't do anything about the body?
That's called crime.
Is that in all
Yes.
the states? Or just
That's desecration.
my ancestor who was in the American Revolution is buried under the city's new high school. So they just took his gravestone and leaned it up against a fence in another cemetery.
Now, I don't know when they did that, but that would be a crime today, and I would be all over them about that.
Good.
I don't let up either. I've got some things that have been going on for 3 years now, and I'm still working on them. My job is to be as irritating as I possibly can
Good job.
to people who don't do right. And it's kind of fun. Anyway. So the intention of this act is to provide notice of buyers of property with known burial grounds and grave sites. And trust me, every time that y'all report a cemetery and I put it on the map, it is now a known cemetery. 468102 definitions. It defines what a crypt is, what a grave site, and it says that it applies to human remains. TCA 468103 says that a landowner has a duty to protect graves or crypts. Disturbances are prohibited, and if you don't like it, you can petition to transfer the remains. So a cemetery owner, and a person can own a cemetery without being a family member if the cemetery is not set aside as a tax-exempt plat. However, the way our former attorney Joe Sanders and I, we talked about it, our interpretation as an office is that a cemetery can be owned by an entity, the tombstones are owned by family members, and the graves are owned by no one. That's why you have to petition to relocate them. The owner must ensure the cemetery is on the deed prior to transfer or sale. So if you're giving your cemetery to kids, make sure it's on the deed. You don't necessarily have to sell it, but you can sell them. Most people won't buy a cemetery and don't want to, but it's still got to be on the deed. It cannot come off the deed. It defines a prohibited area, and we said this, 10 feet from graves and 5 feet from a crypt, and it notifies the owner that if you don't like it, go see 46.4.
Is there any more detail anywhere about duty to protect?
Well, and that's a good point. What is the duty to protect a grave?
I have a cemetery that I bought. I mean, I bought
Yeah.
land and it has a cemetery on it. So what
You just-
exactly is my duty to protect?
Your duty is, and I will say this because I've had this successfully happen too. You don't have to do anything, but you can't do anything within 10 feet of the graves, of each grave. Most developers actually they'll leave a buffer zone around a cemetery. Some do not, and I've caught them not doing that, and they've been in trouble. But most will. But you only have to leave a 10-foot buffer, and that's not a lot. Yeah.
How do you get permission to do some of this stuff? Genealogy is my hobby, and up in Ohio, the church that has a cemetery next to it wanted a baseball or basketball area. So they took all the gravestones, turned them upside down, so if you did dig in, you never, on top of the grave, covered it all over with, what do you call it?
Yeah, that's called
Asphalt.
desecration. Now, in Tennessee it is. I don't know what happens. I don't know Ohio cemetery law.
Ohio.
It'll be different. But you can go look it up. But I would prosecute for that.
So I have a question. You went back to, you said that in some cases they don't either know or knowingly don't transfer the deed of ownership for the grave. Now, if the property owner buys it, doesn't know that deed exists, and is he legally free, or?
If the property owner buys it this is who I've had people sue, the title companies. You go back, because if a title company hasn't gone far back enough and there's a deed that says there was a cemetery on the property, that's on the title company, and you can sue them. That's why you have title companies. It's insurance.
But then the current property owner doesn't really own that cemetery, is that correct?
It depends. If the cemetery is a tax exempt plat and has stayed that way, technically no. But if it has been on a deed before and has just been transferring it, yes, the property owner does own it. So, TCA 3917.3, criminal offenses. Well, 313 spells out desecration of honored places or flags. It is a Class E felony. A person may not desecrate a place of worship or burial. Unfortunately, it does not describe what that is, except in that one that I was talking about, 46.1. It spells that out specifically, and you might be able to use that, but we need to update the laws to where for the other cemeteries that is there as well. So you'll just have to have a good attorney. But our office interprets desecration as a lot of different things.
So it says places or flags, so someone, but we go and place flags on all the veterans' graves in Smoky.
Yeah, you can't take them. You can't.
So we had
Pull 'em
someone-
off.
We had someone go and cut up the flags. Would that?
That would be desecration. That would be a violation. It's a Class E felony.
Okay.
Yep.
Something we see a good bit on the Confederate side of the house is cemeteries will post US flags only. Can they legally bar us from placing an appropriate flag on a Confederate veteran's grave under TCA?
It depends on who is managing the cemetery. Now, okay. 46.7, which I don't have in here, it is something somebody very wisely came up with at some point that allows you to, somebody somewhere realized that most cemeteries are never going to be taken care of. So 46.7 enables a group to set up, to be a caretaker for a cemetery. The problem is, it doesn't say there, that I can find that there can't be two groups taking care of a cemetery. So that is where I'm really, really confused. But I've had a situation where a group, it was a 501, and they disbanded the 501, and then they tried to say, some of the people that did the 501 said, well, I'm the cemetery owner. I was like, no, the 501's gone now. You are not the cemetery owner. The family, it reverts to family. So, oh, it's been, yeah. You can't just sit there, okay, I did a 501, okay, I'm disbanding it, now it's mine. You can't do that. I don't know as far as 46.7. You can become a steward of a cemetery. A county can recognize you as the steward of the cemetery, but I'm not sure if it actually makes you the owner. And that's something to check out. It's something I need to read about. So there's your answer. It's a big cloudy, I don't know yet. But if you place flags on a veteran's grave and you have permission to do so from the family members, they cannot take that up. TCA 3917.312, corpse abuse. Well, that's a Class E felony. Prison time 1 to 6 years, fine up to $3,000. And always remind people, if you commit a Class E felony, you can't vote for, till it's over. So if you really like to vote, don't desecrate cemeteries. Don't abuse corpses. What to do if you see desecration, it doesn't matter if you're a family member or not, report it to the police immediately and also contact me because I want to know what the police department's doing. Contact the county court to notify them of the desecration. These entities must uphold Tennessee law. If they refuse, call the regional DA and notify me. If the regional DA doesn't act, call me and I will call the Attorney General's office. Corpse abuse. If you see accidental disinterment, if you're like digging on your property and all of a sudden a skeleton comes up, stop immediately. Call the police and the health department immediately. That is state law. Remember, you may have found a murder victim, so please don't be an accessory to a murder. Okay?
So you have to specifically contact the health department? It's not good enough that the police bring forensics and stuff out?
They can, but you're supposed to contact both of them.
I have a novel that takes place. I know grave, and I'm wondering about that. I didn't put the health department in.
I don't think you have to contact the Department of Archaeology, but they should be notified also.
All right, thank you.
If you see intentional disinterment, call the police immediately. That includes, although my forte is not pre-Columbian Native American graves, but it also includes that, and the Department of Archaeology will help you with that. A pre-Columbian Native American grave is a grave. It was a human being, it's buried in the ground. TCA 685508, disinterment and reinterment. Well, why is it in 68.5? Oh, because that's the health department's code. Why don't they say that in 46 so that we know? I don't know, but I know, so you can call me. Authorization for disinterment and reinterment in cases of movement of cemeteries or parts of cemeteries or for reuniting families shall be required prior to disinterment of a dead body or fetus. So you can't just go, yeah, man, I'm going to move grandpa. Can't do it. Your funeral home, your licensed funeral home is supposed to know this. And the ones that I have met so far do know this. But the state actually has to authorize, they have to sign a paper that authorizes the relocation. I had a situation up in Johnson County where this didn't happen. And, I still don't know what the results have been, but it was a mess. What happened was the guy got a backhoe guy to move it, but the guy from the funeral home couldn't be on site to watch it, and so they moved it anyway. Supposedly, we don't know, and the funeral home refused to sign off on it because it's their right. They didn't have a guy there to watch it. 508B, such authorization shall be issued by the state registrar to a licensed funeral director or person acting as such, meaning an archaeology company, upon proper application. Who is allowed? Funeral homes and archaeology companies. So there you go. Walter Hines versus state. So a lot of people think that since this was decided in 1911, it doesn't count. But they're wrong. It does count. It sets precedent in Tennessee and across the nation. You'll be happy to know that your state set the precedent for all these cemetery issues that happen legally throughout the nation. I see it cited everywhere. It's not completely included in Tennessee code yet, although parts of it are. It defines interested party rights. An interested party has the right to maintain, repair, and beautify a cemetery. They have the right of visitation, and they have the right of burial, and that is in perpetuity. Yes?
Do roadside memorials fall under this?
I do not deal with roadside memorials, thank goodness.
Amen.
That's I know that TDOT allows roadside memorials to happen. I don't know what their rules are as far as them being removed. In fact, I don't ever see them removed, so I don't know. I should ask TDOT about that though. It declares that a cemetery is a cemetery forever, unless Title 46(4). A landowner cannot obstruct interested party visitation. They cannot desecrate. This also means plowing up headstones and using the land for something else. Can't do it. Other relevant precedents. Well,
Brief.
huh?
I'm amazed the list.
Oh, there's tons.
Good for that.
Davis versus May, Texas 2000E, confirmed that interested parties have the right of ingress and egress. McCoy versus Barr, Kansas 2012, county employees are granted an easement to maintain a cemetery if they want to. Now, most counties don't want to do this because guess what? It costs money. But Wayne County has a program. Yeah, they're all over it. And they have the right to they have the right to bring prisoners in there. They don't bring violent offenders in there, but I mean, they do. You can contact a police department and get prisoners to do it, and they get nonviolent offenders. You can also get the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts.
Is that Wayne County thing written anywhere?
Hmm?
Is that Wayne County?
Yes, Wayne County, Tennessee. They've got a.
Written anywhere so we can look at it and see what they're doing?
I'm not sure, but I have their information, and I can get you in contact with James Dixon, and he can tell you all about it. Yeah.
What are you saying these groups are doing, the Boy Scouts or the Bridge?
Boy Scouts, there is a Boy Scout law. Boy Scouts have the right to maintain any cemetery. And I imagine Girl Scouts too. I mean, they call it the Boy Scout law, probably because I don't know, somebody liked boys better or something. But,
Where was this law written?
huh?
Where's is it written?
Oh, I don't have the code with me, but I have the code. You'll just have to write it.
State or federal?
It's state. Yep. Rhodes versus Nicholas, Missouri, 1981. Relatives are granted the right to restrain an owner from interfering with a cemetery's purpose. I do want to tell you here that a cemetery is considered a religious plot. If you interfere with people that are coming to do religious activities in a cemetery, that is a violation of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Cannot do it. I've had arguments with attorneys about this too, and it's like, well, why can't you do that? I was like, because, yeah, do you want a civil rights case? You can have one if you want one.
Federal one.
Yeah. Stoker versus Brown, Tennessee, 1979. This is one that is very, just in a nutshell, it's a very long case, but it basically declares that a cemetery is the same size it ever was, even though somehow it miraculously shrank.
Wow.
Because what happens is people try to shrink cemetery. Oh, there's nobody buried in this part. Nope, it's the same size it ever was.
Yeah, we were on our way up to Sneakville a couple years ago to get COVID shots. And we passed a house that had, I don't know, 5 or 6,
Half a dozen houses.
they had graves in the front yards.
Yep.
Now, if they put a driveway up next to a gravestone, that's their property.
If it's within 10 feet, it's illegal.
Even on their property.
Mhm.
Okay, interesting.
Now, so in Tennessee, you can bury people that you want to bury. Don't think about it.
Thank you, dear.
In a family cemetery? We can bury you anywhere. No, I'm just kidding.
On our own property.
You can. And as far as, okay, so here's the rules about burying somebody on your own property. If you are in a rural area, there is no law. I mean, you can even put somebody in a shroud and put them in the ground, but you have to have a death certificate.
Oh,
Shoot.
Yes. You can't just start burying folks. And please make sure they're dead first. But yeah, you do have to have a death certificate. But if you are in a jurisdiction of a town, a township or something like that, they will have their rules and you need to contact their codes office.
we're in the county.
Yeah, well, the county, you won't, if it's in the county, they don't have that. It's rural. Davidson County is weird and unique because the county is actually the city. They have a rule for the entire county because it is a metropolitan area. And when they had the Covenant shooting last year, my office got contacted. I had got contacted by a representative from one of the families because they wanted to bury their deceased on their farm. And they couldn't get nobody in Nashville knew what, but anyway, I knew the right people to call. And I found out that in Nashville, in the rural areas of the county, you just have to have a 5-acre plot or bigger. But every jurisdiction is going to be different. So, yes, if a cemetery was declared an acre big back in 1859, and somehow it's now a 1/4 acre, it's still an acre big. It may make some people mad, but it is.
Now, if you were buying a house, this would all be written down.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, when we bought our house, you know, the documents are like this.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm here, because I can go, oh, yeah, just, you know. I'll try to steer you right anyway. But again, I'll always preface, I'm not an attorney. Why can't I plow up a cemetery? It's my land. Well, the cemetery might not really be yours. Call the Register of Deeds to confirm. If it's on a deed anywhere, if it has ever been set aside as a tax-exempt plat, it is not your cemetery. Even if it is yours, you still must leave it alone. See TCA 46.8. There is a legal process for relocation, which you know, 46.4. If the rules make you angry, blame English common law, blame the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and blame yourself for purchasing the land before you knew the law.
That should be number one.
What should I do if I'm a landowner? Well, follow the law. If you don't, you're going to lose. It's expensive and will take up your limited time on earth. I had in the family a personal situation where somebody in the family had Alzheimer's, and they kind of got, anyway, they thought a county road that had been not countied anymore was their road then, and they tried to keep the adjacent landowner from using the county road, and at $20,000 later, they lost, and they found out that the road was mostly on the other guy's property. So I'm just saying, work stuff out. Be nice. Visitors may be annoying, but try to work something out if they request access. Don't just do what you want and hope no one finds out, because if you do, interested parties will call me and I'll investigate, and my investigation will really annoy you. Visitor, be courteous. There are many reasons a landowner is reluctant to have you on his or her property. If the landowner is a curmudgeon, be nice anyway and document everything. Paper. Even if you do a phone call, write down what was the phone call, the time you called, all that. Also, follow the law. Don't go in and start, having a beer party. Yes.
I have ancestors in the cemetery. The land is posted, there's a big sign at the gate that says no trespassing, it's got a padlock.
Mm-hmm. They have to, you have to have access to a key to it.
Okay. So, do I have a responsibility to inform them that I'm going to the cemetery?
Well, no. However, as I always say, I don't want people to get shot. What I say is you contact them, and if they say no, contact me. I will make sure that they say yes.
Well, I asked them one time when they were there on the property, it's not a house or anything, I said, I'd like to clean this up. They were like, oh, I don't know.
Well, they can not know all they want to.
They didn't want me going across.
But I do know.
Something was planted, I guess, they have weed or something in that field. And they,
Can't help it. There's an implied easement. The way the law reads is from the nearest road at reasonable times in a reasonable manner.
what law is that?
That's the precedent set in Hines.
Okay.
Now, what's reasonable? I don't know. That's between you and the landowner.
In
However,
this case, it's obvious.
but he can't stop you. He's nearest road. They can't divert you around, they can't do that. I've had that happen up in Putnam County once. The guy tried to change the entrance of the road so that the old people couldn't get up. Because they knew that if they had a bumpy road and everything, nobody could get there. And we fixed that. Follow the law. If you don't, you're only going to incur unwanted expenses and penalties. My dad, the former Army colonel, would say, follow the law. And if I didn't follow the law, buddy, I would know about it. Okay, so for more information, you can contact me. I have cards. I probably didn't bring enough, but I do have them. And here's my information, my office number. It is easier to get to me by email. I'm just letting you know that because I'm only in the office 3 days a week. I get to work 2 days a week at home. I have just now figured out how to answer the phone at home on my computer. Hopefully that will make a difference. But before I was using my personal cell phone, and I didn't want to use my personal cell phone for business. Tennessee Department of Archaeology, Phil Hodge. You can contact him. There's his number, and there is his email. And also Ben Nance is really helpful too, and I can get you his information. He's extremely helpful. But other than that, does anybody have questions or answers? Yes.
Yeah, something you've kind of talked a little bit about. We ran across this in the relocation of General Forrest out in Memphis.
Oh, I know. I was right there on the periphery of that.
Ed Phillips is a very good friend of mine.
Mhm.
What in TCA are options when it is very obvious that a legal party, like the private parties who invented circuitous paths, or when a government, it's clear that they have no interest in complying with the law, and they're dragging it out and making it be as difficult and arduous as possible. What in TCA do parties that have legal rights under these laws, what would be done to the local government when they say, yeah, we're going to do everything we can to make this as hard as we can?
Well, they can make it as hard as they want to, but they still can't stop you. The fact of the matter is, if it has to go to the Attorney General, it will. And I know that Patrick, as far as stuff like that, I mean, he was, the commission had to approve that relocation of that monument. Now, the graves are different. Yeah, the graves are different. I mean, the family member had the right to relocate those graves, and I think there was a family member involved in that.
There were representatives.
Yep. But yeah, because I remember all that. But yeah, if a family member wants to move it, the family member's got to be involved in the petition, and then once the petition is approved, nobody's stopping them. You had a question?
Yeah, you had a thing about access for repair. So I have some relatives who are buried in Tennessee, and the stones have been broken and all. I have the right to go in and...
Yes, you do. If you're a family member, yes, you do. And I have a list of nice, wonderful people that do that.
So you can go in any cemetery?
Not any cemetery, only cemeteries you have the right of access to.
That were one of your ancestors?
Yes.
Okay, his grandfather, whoever brought the stone was an idiot. And it's one of those round things that roll when your kid gets drunk and it's 10 o'clock at night and they want to play. So you'll never find him, and should know where he is. Can we turn that over and cement it down?
Yep.
So the name's there?
Yes, you can. And now let me just tell you, once it gets into that framework, it's family versus family, and I do not get involved.
It's his grandfather.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that if another family member doesn't want you to do it, that's between
He
you
could
all.
care less. That they would have admit they ever lived in Ohio.
But you have the right to do that, yeah. I mean, I don't know about Ohio again. Remember, I'm looking in the state.
I have a question. It's here in Tennessee, and it's in the book I wrote it, but I haven't sold it yet. I have a question. The grave that was dug up that was a murder in the Civil War, and it was in Fort Dickinson, which is it's a park of some sort. So I have the police are involved, the forensics are involved. Should I also write in archaeology?
I would.
Okay.
If it's a grave that old, I would.
Yeah. And then it was accidentally found by a couple of kids. They're not liable for anything if they report right away, right?
If they reported it, they're fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So you were talking about getting the county permission, getting from the county permission to access. Who in the county organization is that you would contact to get that?
Probably the mayor's office, yeah.
Start there?
I'd start there, and it may be the commission.
Okay.
It may be one of those commission things.
My other question, one of the other questions I have is, you brought up the code for the Boy Scout law.
Yeah,
I really need that because I work with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts on placing wreaths and flags throughout
Okay.
Tennessee. So it's really nice to have that.
yeah, I can get you that information
Okay.
easily.
And then lastly is, does Tennessee law apply to graves that are buried on federal land?
Well, that's an interesting question.
That's a good debate.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you,
Yes, okay.
I actually had success. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I had success getting TVA to go through the petition process.
There's just some Union soldiers' graves up in the state park, or the federal park,
Federal Park.
that are just,
They still have to abide by Tennessee law because the federal government does not,
hates both.
all cemetery law is left to the states. So they can't stop you. Matter of fact, I had the situation with the Isaac Shelton graves, which are up on the Appalachian Trail. And I went up there with bear spray, let me tell you. But they were not willing to open a gate for a family member. And probably, honestly, what it really was because they were so understaffed, they didn't have anybody to deal with it. But what we did, I went up there with the family member, and the family member, bless his heart, had a bad back, and we hiked for many, many miles past the gate to get to that trail. I wrote a report on what we had to do to access that, and then I wrote state recommendations to Cherokee National Forest for what they needed to do to keep that from happening in the future. And I pointed up stuff like, because since the guy had a bad back, I brought up with the Disabilities, Americans with Disabilities Act and all sorts of stuff. And now, guess what? You can check out a key. I don't play, man.
Good question. I help maintain the records for a local cemetery near a church.
Thank you.
And
You'd be surprised how many there are no records for.
I have a database and everything, but my question is, the graves that we have, like a single body in that we know of, and it's not been used in like 70, 80, maybe 100 years, is there a course of action that we could take to allow us to repossess the remaining spaces?
If there's a body in it, you cannot.
Well, we don't intend to move the body, we just want to use the space.
You can't.
Okay, there's no way.
Nope.
That's what I thought, but I just want to make.
Yes.
And even if there's open land and they're set.
The Army's weird. I know that the cemetery my mom and dad are in, they actually buried my mom on top of my father, but they have special clearance to do that.
Even if we have an area that we think there may be some like slaves there or whatever.
You can't bury in there.
We just can't.
You just gotta leave it alone.
If we were to, is there a,
You can petition to relocate them.
well, I guess my question is, we're not sure where they are. Is there
Okay.
is there an act or some way?
In that
get a
case,
ground penetrating system?
yes, and the thing is, and I have a whole list of people that are qualified to do that, and trust me, the people that aren't qualified to do that are not on my list. I've actually thrown people off of it. We will not back up a person that does ground penetrating radar that does it specifically for development. That's just like some fly-by-night. Matter of fact, there's a company from Ohio that I will not support because
I probably know them.
yeah, the only way I can support ground penetrating radar is if there's an actual report. You can't just sit there and do it and say, okay, well, there were no graves there. That's not, you're never going to get me on that side. And we had a situation that's still going on legally in Nashville where that happened. And yeah, but I have a whole list of people that are qualified to do that. You will have to check what their fees are. Some people are more expensive than others. And it varies widely.
There's no state grant or anything?
No, unfortunately not. Not right now.
That.
Yeah, well, let me correct that. If you, through our federal programs, we have had people apply for grants before for that. We had only one person do it successfully, and they didn't follow the grant. So as a result, they got the money taken away. When you apply for a grant through our federal programs, you better follow it to the T, because they will rip the money away.
Is all this on the Historical Commission website, all the information you showed today?
Yeah, it should be, and if it's not, let me know and I'll put it up.
You want to hit on the ideal, we've been communicating about the selling of a tombstone?
Oh, yes. We need to talk about that because, okay, this same situation in Nashville that I was just mentioning. So what happened was there were two family members. Well, there were more family members than that, but there were two contesting family members. One family member owned the property inside which the cemetery, which was a tax-exempt plat, existed. It was the family cemetery. Well, that person took it upon themselves. There were markers in that cemetery. That person claimed they got this company from Ohio to do a GPR survey and said that there were no graves in the area. Now, it might be true. I'm not saying it's not true, because I think the cemetery is somewhere else. I've been to the property and I think I know where the cemetery is. But nevertheless, there were these monuments there, and the city of Nashville had recognized where the monuments were as the place the cemetery was. So, in effect, there were two cemeteries. The real one, and then the one that they thought the cemetery was. Well, what happened was the family member decided, since there were no graves there, the person, and again, like I said, I can't prove either way because I wasn't really happy with the report, but archaeology approved it. He took there were, what do you call them? There were crypts. There were the table crypts. Mm-hmm. Table graves. And box tombs, thank you, that's what I'm looking for. And the person had them moved to another cemetery somewhere else, but no graves were relocated because there were no graves there, supposedly. Well, the problem was when my office was called by the other family member that was mad that the tombstones got moved, I told him, I said, man, it's between y'all two. I said, our office would look at that as desecration, but legally, because one family member, like for instance, a family member could go in and take out a tombstone and put in a gaudy, awful tombstone there, as long as they're a family member and they can do that. Another family member gets mad, well, guess what? That's between them and we don't get involved in it. I hate that it's that way. If somebody calls me into court on that, well, what do you consider? Do you consider that desecration? I'm going to say, yes, I consider it desecration. But legally, it's not necessarily desecration. It can fall under the idea of beautifying a cemetery. But to me, it's desecration. I'm just going to tell you. I'm going to report it as desecration. You can call the police will come out and do something. They're probably, in that case, going to say it's a family matter. But it's worth calling the police anyway. I always tell people, man, just call them and get them out there and make a report. Get them, and if a police people refuse to make a report, call me, and I'll make sure that they make a report.
Where would you start as calling in Ohio?
I don't know Ohio law. You're going to have to call, they probably have a historical commission there, and you should call them and ask who their cemetery person is, if it's there or if it's the Department of Archaeology, because a lot of times it's in the Department of Archaeology. North Carolina's is the Department of Archaeology. Arkansas's is the Historical Commission. It just depends on what state you're in.
What?
You got another question?
We kind of skirted the issue on that one. The issue here is we have a tombstone in Johnson City that's for sale.
Oh, man, I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy says he legally purchased it because the person whose garage the tombstone was in died. The family sold to an estate company all that was in the garage and all that was in the property. And then he bought it from the estate company, so he legally owns the tombstone as part of the stuff that he bought. So it doesn't belong to the cemetery, which we know it belongs out because there's a foot marker there.
Yeah.
It belongs to him, so he can sell it for $180.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. And again, what would I say to that if somebody said, well, they took the tombstone up? It'd be like, yeah, that wasn't really cool, man, but
I think they took it up originally to repair the marker,
yeah.
and the guy died before he had a chance to put it back.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh my gosh. That is just such a mess, and I
It's gonna be a mess.
it's a mess. But you know, I've had the same thing. Oh shoot, who's that? Oh shoot, who is it? Well, I mean, like William Edmondson made tombstones, and I see them for sale from time to time. And sometimes people actually did approve them for sale, and so when I see them come up for auction, I have to go. I'll contact the auction companies and say, how do you know that this is? You know, what's the provenance on this? Where did you get it? I've worked with case auctions here on some of
Most
that.
of them use just seconds
Yeah,
replaced.
but yeah, case calls me.
And that's why the VA, every time I put a new stone in or replace an old one,
Yeah,
the old one has to be destroyed.
that's what they and
Because I've had family members say,
Yeah.
can I keep the old one? And I say, no, I got it. Bam, right, yeah, I can't.
yeah,
Well, they're all over the place.
yeah, and that is an answer. I think what happened, like for example, there was I can't believe I can't remember this guy's name, but there was a guy that made pottery headstones.
That's in Washington County.
Yes. Decker, thank you. Okay. And a bunch of those I've seen, like the State Museum has a bunch of them. I know because I've worked there. We had a bunch on display. And I'm wondering if those markers were ever replaced with other markers.
Some of them were, and some of the originals are still there.
Right. But, I mean, if a family member is like, yeah, man, I want to sell this. But now I will tell you this, like I told you in the email the other day, every family member that's associated with that tombstone has the right to the proceeds to that. Because the tombstone is owned by the family, not one family member.
I've got an interesting one, which I would never destroy this. It's a rock. It's a young Confederate kid who died down in Rome County.
Mm-hmm.
This couple just took this kid in because he was sick, and he died. Well, they just carved his name in his regiment. Now, the thing's broken and it's starting to deteriorate.
And you can fix that.
I would like to get him a new one,
Yeah.
but I would not want to.
You wouldn't want to destroy the
I
old.
would want to take that to the Rome County Historical Society or something like that. Would that be against the law?
Well, I would tell you this. This is what we suggest. If there is a deteriorating marker, you can put a new marker there. Just don't touch the old one. Let it deteriorate.
There's a great story behind this thing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's documented.
Yeah. But that's what we suggest is just leave the marker in there and put a marker near it.
I have a question that maybe you may not have answered good. My husband and I are both veterans, and we're going to be buried in the National Cemetery. Who's in charge of that? If some of them would be desecrated or anything, is the government replace them, or do family members?
Yeah, that's a good question. If it's federal, you'll definitely have to call the VA, because I'm not sure they'll have special rules. And I don't know, like, for instance, the cemetery that my parents are buried in is state military. And so I would call the Veterans Administration, the State Veterans Administration. Mini Bears Grinder.
Well, have I given a hand to Graham?
I have cards. I may end up giving them all out, but I have cards, and please contact me anytime. Like I said, I'm better at email. I'm just letting you know. I'm getting kind of...
Hey, Graham, who did the preservation work on the picture?
Yeah, we do.
They did. I told them, can you make the little hairs go away? And they did.
Fantastic job. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.